How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiegue, today live on Wednesday, August the 7th, and now we're talking some more around the NFL with some storylines going on. We're going to get into some more of the talk with Brandon Aiyuk and how, from the 49ers' point of things, how it would look if Brandon Aiyuk was to move on. What impact would that make on their Super Bowl chances and everyone talking about their Super Bowl window? Also, a new segment, a continual segment that we're going to start off on today's show. Some of the biggest remaining questions remaining across the NFL with all the teams. We're going to start off today with the NFC North and looking at some of the biggest unanswered questions left there. Plus, we're going to get into some extension talk also with the Kansas City Chiefs and three of their starters still looking to get extended past 2024. That'll be some of the topics we get to. There's a lot more coming up on today's show. So before I start, as a reminder to you guys, if you have any questions or comments, please use the tip and donations link that you see on your screen, gsmcpodcast.net. By using that link, I'm able to see your question, I'll answer it, I'll acknowledge it, and I'll read it out loud. And that way, I'll get your guys' thoughts on anything you have to say, anything I say, or just on any of the topics on today's show. It's a big help for the network and this show as well. So if you would, please use the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net, with any question or comment on today's episode. But now, we can jump in right away to the biggest story taking over the entirety of the offseason, at least for right now, the entirety of this training camp period that we got going on. The development of this Brandon Aiyuk deal. It seems like every day that I try to plan out what to talk about on today's show, something else changes, and it just shifts the perspective of where we're going to go with Brandon Aiyuk. Is he going to get traded? Is he going to go to this team? Now this other team pulls out. It's all getting kind of mixed up, if I'm being quite honest. But again, to just continue on from what we talked about yesterday, some more developments around Brandon Aiyuk. Now, apparently, the New England Patriots pulled out. They're no longer interested in pursuing Brandon Aiyuk. Now it only seems to be the Browns and the Steelers really in pole position. Funny enough, right? Ironic enough for the Pittsburgh Steelers to be in pole position to get Brandon Aiyuk on their team. That is according to Matt Mayoko, who has been reporting on this whole situation very closely. The 49ers now stand in a weird spot because it basically comes down to what their asking price is, obviously, but also the amount of power that Brandon Aiyuk has as well in this situation is something we don't typically see in the NFL, really, unless you're a quarterback. And other than that, you don't really see it other than probably in the NFL, in the NBA, where players have a lot of power in determining where they end up going, where they're ended up traded to, or where they're ended up signing to as well. So this is a very new, and it's pretty exciting also to just see it and follow it, just to see how it all plays out, because there's a lot of things twisting and turning with this whole situation. But like I said, Pittsburgh and Cleveland seem to be the biggest remaining, spots for Brandon Aiyuk to land. And it seems like the Browns are in a spot where they're offering what the 49ers are asking for, but Aiyuk's not so keen on joining them. He's more keen on joining the Pittsburgh Steelers, according to various reports, but they are yet to offer anything that meets the 49ers asking price. So that's where we are up until now, but it seems like we're right about to have a breakthrough with this whole situation, right? And if we do get to that point, what would it mean for the San Francisco 49ers after having one of the best, not only receiving cores with Kittle, Aiyuk, Debo, and Juwan Jennings, I'll throw him in there as well, even Christian McCaffrey to an extent, and just the overall such a well-built roster, at least on the offensive side of the ball as well. What does this do for them? What does this do for their Super Bowl chances if they do end up losing Brandon Aiyuk? Well, you'd have to start right away, I think, with what you're losing, right? You're arguably losing your best pure wide receiver out of that group. That's the main talk around Aiyuk, right? He's the guy that usually gets open, beats the opposing team's best corner. Not that Debo can't do it, but Debo's, I think, more so seen like a guy that can almost do everything, but doesn't do maybe the wide receiver, skill set as well as Brandon Aiyuk. I think Aiyuk has really grown in that department over the last few years, and he's shown it with his production on the field, right? But now, if you're gonna lose that guy, your team is still very talented. The roster around Brock Purdy and just in general is still very talented, but how does that impact now in the bigger picture where it seems like everybody else is getting better? I talked yesterday about the Lions and how they're super excited about Jameson Williams and Jahmyr Gibbs taking that next step. They're going to be one of the biggest, challengers to the 49ers. Also, the Eagles, they just went out and got Saquon Barkley. You ideally want to keep everybody together, and that's why this whole contract situation with Brandon Aiyuk was seemingly being just stalled over, because the 49ers logically didn't want to lose Brandon Aiyuk. But now I think everyone's gotten to a point where they just want this to be over. If you can't afford to pay him, there's no real reason to just keep him on your roster. So now the 49ers are kind of forced to just look beyond that. And how does this affect their Super Bowl window, continuing on with that? It's odd because the talk about Super Bowl seems so casual with the 49ers, just because it always seems like they're in the picture. They're always in the conversation, right? We've taken it a little for granted, I believe, that the 49ers are just always going to be there. And I think Debo, I remember watching the Netflix series on, the receiver Netflix series that he talked about, always being there, and how you always think you could get there the next year, but it took him a while. It took the 49ers in general a while to get back there, and now to just think they're going to be in that picture again. They're arguably the team that needs it the most, but now if you're going to lose Brandon Aiyuk, how sure are you that this team can get back there as easily? And not only that, in terms of just getting back to the Super Bowl, but thinking about this long term, thinking about the quarterback position, a lot has been said about Brock Purdy and him being next in line to earn a massive contract, a massive market-setting contract with, talks about $60 million, $58 million per year for Brock Purdy if he continues to play at the level that he is at. And everybody already had him penciled in because everybody thinks the 49ers are just going to get back to the Super Bowl because they've been there so many times. But now with Aiyuk, I think it becomes a little trickier now, because not only are you losing a great player, but I think he had a chemistry with Brock Purdy that I think not the other receivers didn't really have it in some aspect, because George Kittle wasn't really used too much. I say that, but last year he had the second most amount of targets from Brock Purdy, but even so, he recorded 90 targets going his way, whereas Brandon Aiyuk recorded 105 going his way, and that was with the share that the 49ers offense had to, split up between Debo, Aiyuk, Christian, and George Kittle, Juwan Jennings in there as well. They all had to split those carries, and George Kittle was still second. But now, with Brock Purdy and potentially Aiyuk moving on, of course more people are going to get a higher amount of targets going their way. But I think that chemistry that Brock Purdy had with Aiyuk specifically not only benefited, obviously, Aiyuk in performing the way that he did, but it made Brock Purdy look a lot better, I believe, in terms of throwing the ball, always having that guy that more often than not can get open. And now this talk about $60 million, earning that and being worth that in the next year, next offseason, I feel like that could be a little bit in jeopardy now, because your number one target, the guy that's always been there for Brock Purdy, could potentially be moving on. And now you're in uncharted territory, right, with Brock. Who becomes that next go-to weapon? Is it going to be Debo? Is he going to be healthy enough all year to be that go-to guy? How much more often does George Kittle get involved in the passing game and things like that? Are Juwan Jennings and the rookie Ricky Pearsall ready to step up into that role? There's a lot of questions now that pop up, logically, obviously, with the 49ers, that I think a lot of fans or a lot of people never thought it could get to this point. But we're talking about this Super Bowl window now, with the 49ers always being there constantly year in and year out. And they've been to 2 Super Bowls, and unfortunately they've lost the 2 to the Kansas City Chiefs, which is just unlucky, honestly, to face them in both of the times you've made the Super Bowl. But now they're undoubtedly the team that needs this Super Bowl the most, and to lose a player like this, in terms of Super Bowl window, and I don't like overusing that because I think it gets a little too generalized on what specifically is a Super Bowl window, but there's no doubt that the 49ers are in this period of this is their chance to go and get it, because how much better can this roster become? And is this the end officially of their Super Bowl window? I mean, I wouldn't say definitively, just because if you take away Aiyuk and say you get a trade with the Cleveland Browns and you bring in Amari Cooper or something like that, that's not too big of a drop-off. Honestly, if you just look at the stats, they are pretty similar to one another. So I like Amari Cooper. I think he's very underrated. And if he just jumped into that offense with Kyle Shanahan and the rest of the weapons that they have around him, you thought he was good in Cleveland. Could you only imagine the coverage that he would see in San Francisco with all the other guys having to be accounted for? I think he would have a great year. I think he would have a monster year, actually, with the 49ers. And he's already pretty much at the peak of his power. So it would be a seamless transition. But regardless of that, I think the way that Aiyuk fit this team, and again, the chemistry that he had with Brock, makes this picture for the 49ers a bit more cloudy in the sense that you have a lot of newness coming in, a lot of unique situations that it might alter the flow, the rhythm that you just had, like, clicking for you last year. But now it is in a weird spot. And you know what's funny about all of this, all these hypotheticals and these scenarios? The 49ers, in the end, don't have to trade Brandon Aiyuk. We're talking about the power that he has and that it almost seems like a foregone conclusion. But really, if no teams meet the requirements of their asking price or can agree to a contract with Brandon, again, I said it yesterday, the 49ers don't have to end up trading him, and they could look to next offseason to maybe find a better deal, have a better understanding of where they are as a team. That could be, the final decision to all of this, and, nothing could end up happening, which is the most ironic part about this. But I think now we're so close to getting something, to finally be, clear and finalized at the end of the day. It just depends on who is going to end up, meeting all the requirements. And for the 49ers, I don't think this is the definitive end, but it is something to watch if Brock Purdy, I don't want to directly correlate it, but Brandon Aiyuk not being at practice, not really participating at all, and now you're seeing for the first time Brock Purdy struggling, throwing a lot of interceptions in practice and training camp. I think people are taking that and making a big deal out of it, but there is a little something there, Brandon, the chemistry that he has with Brock, and he's not practicing, and now he's throwing a lot of interceptions. I don't think it directly one means the other, but it is a little bit weird how it all lines up like that. But, we'll see. I think Brock has a good chance to, be successful without Brandon. He has all these great weapons, but it's just going to be weird not seeing him out there. I'm sure for all those guys all his teammates talk up Brandon Aiyuk as one of the best receivers. So to see him move on, it's surely going to be a big loss, but we'll see. The NFC is going to be very unpredictable. The 49ers still are just going to have to lean towards somebody else who's going to step up. They're going to use Christian McCaffrey a lot. Maybe they go more to a run-heavy offense. Maybe some other running backs step up. It could be another wrench in this, plot that we got going on for 2024. A lot of newness, and Brandon Aiyuk could find himself with a new team in 2024. We're going to continue to update you guys on that topic as we move along this week, but we're going to put a pin in that conversation and move on to the next topic, the start of a new series that I want to get going, the biggest remaining unanswered questions going through each division and each team, and just talking about some of the things that they have still to iron out. We're going to start off with the NFC North after this break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We are back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to start a new series now, getting into the preseason and getting closer, honestly, to the start of the regular season. We are almost fully into gear now to get back into football, but with all these teams, finalizing all their final touch-ups and preparations and answering a lot of their own biggest doubts with their rosters, I thought I'd come on here and start a new series on some of the biggest remaining questions for a lot of these teams throughout the NFL and going through each team and just talking about what their biggest question is, what their biggest need is, and what could be some possible solutions to some of these biggest questions still unanswered. And we're going to start off with the NFC. And we're going to shuffle on through the division as we go through this segment. But starting off with the Packers, I think to me, one of the biggest things that I want to know and how it will all shape out will be how their backfield will look in 2024, because obviously the biggest addition to this group and just in general to the Green Bay Packers was Josh Jacobs in free agency, signing him to a massive deal, I think a 4-year deal or a 3-year deal, just based off of my memory. Signing him to essentially replace Aaron Jones seemed to be, the main story around it all, how it all developed very quickly. Their interest in Jacobs, him having, an interest in joining the Green Bay Packers. He ends up joining, then quickly Aaron Jones is, released and he signs with the Minnesota Vikings of all teams. And that you would have thought is, it's all settled, right? Josh Jacobs is going to be the main guy. Maybe you sprinkle in a little bit of A.J. Dillon because he was also re-signed. But I think now with the way that they went in the draft, and they also ended up drafting the USC running back Marshawn Lloyd, yeah, it didn't go over too many people's heads. It didn't really scream that it is going to be an impact, draft pick there in another running back. You just thought maybe it was going to be for depth reasons, just in case somebody gets hurt or something like that. But according to their offensive coordinator, Adam Stenovich, he apparently loves Marshawn Lloyd. He loves the speed and the change of pace that he brings in comparison to Josh Jacobs and A.J. Dillon. He said that he'll try to get him involved in, he'll try to get him out there as much as possible. And now you're talking about 3 running backs, right? We're always talking about the running back duos across the NFL and how that seems to be the new trend. But the Packers seemingly are trying to get 3 of these guys involved. And how will that look? How will it all shape out? Essentially trying to split the rock with not only 3 running backs, but also the 4 or 5 receivers that they have on their offense, all trying to get, a piece of the pie as well. It's great to have all these options, but in terms of the running backs and how it'll look, I think Josh Jacobs will be seen as the unquestionable starter. He will be out there once the game starts, maybe on the big plays, on the big downs as well. But I wouldn't be so surprised if A.J. Dillon, who they re-signed this year on a cheaper deal, he wanted to stay with the Packers, and they were all over him just trying to get him to stay as well. To keep both of those guys there and have the same system as you did, just last year with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, I think it could be a positive thing. I'm just interested to see, how their production looks. And also, if you're able to keep all these guys healthy, that's, a great thing. Running backs are also always taking the most wear and tear. So with a guy like Josh Jacobs too, he struggled with injuries recently. So maybe having 2 guys there to spot him isn't the worst idea in the world. But the only worry I guess I would have is the idea of, keeping a guy in there when he's hot, when he has this momentum going. You don't want to mess it up too much with splitting it with not only one other guy, but 2 other guys. That's my only worry. If things get too, out of hand or just don't look right by trying to include too many players in the backfield. It is something that is very unorthodox, I think, nowadays in the NFL. But, I think it could work out, but you only have one football out there. So the Packers are going to be really, deliberate on how they, go about splitting all the reps between the running backs. But that's one team. The next team I wanted to talk about is the Detroit Lions. My biggest question with them, still going back to last year, is who else is going to step up on that defensive line other than Aiden Hutchinson, because the Lions, it's hard to find a glaring weakness with them, in all honesty. Just looking at Hutchinson, clearly the main guy. If you want to talk about the main pass rushers, the main guys that wreak havoc for all the contending teams, you could throw out a bunch of names. You could throw out, Nick Bosa, TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, some of those guys that are up there on those contending teams, they all need a guy like Aiden Hutchinson, and he is starting to fit that mold after last year recording 11.5 sacks. He led this team in that category, but what worries me is, his running mate, the guy that is supposed to benefit from Aiden Hutchinson drawing a lot of the coverage. The next, guy on their roster that had the most sacks, he had about half of the sacks that Aiden Hutchinson had at 11.5, or excuse me, at 5, and Aiden Hutchinson had 11.5. So Hutchinson, good production, as he develops on as a pass rusher, but to have the second guy only have 5, that worries me a little bit just because this Lions team is so good offensively, it seems, and on the defensive side of the ball, I was very, happy that they were able to address the secondary by drafting Terrion Arnold, by, bringing in Carlton Davis, and, addressing those issues in the offseason. But now, I feel like they just missed out on their defensive line a little bit. Yeah, they signed Marcus Davenport and DJ Reader, but again, they don't really scream to me that they're going to right away step in and, produce maybe 8 or close to like 10 sacks or something like that. Marcus Davenport, I think, is coming off a season with the Vikings where I think he had no more than maybe 4 or 3 sacks with them. And DJ Reader is recovering from a quad injury as well. So I still have my doubts about them. When you look in this division, just the 3 other teams, they already have some good pass rushing duos, with the Packers having Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith. The Chicago Bears having Montez Sweat in there as well, with, I'm forgetting the name. I mean, they had Yannick Ngakoue last year that produced some pressure as well for them. But their defensive line seems to be pretty, stacked up as well. Then also you look at the Minnesota Vikings. They addressed it in the offseason, signing Jonathan Grenard and also drafting Dallas Turner. And the Lions still, I think, are very benefited with having Aiden Hutchinson, a very good pass rusher, but I think they still need somebody else to join him. And now are they going to go out and, acquire somebody? Like I said, Yannick Ngakoue, I'm pretty sure, is still out there as a free agent. They could try that out. Or are they comfortable with maybe somebody that they already have on the roster that they feel could step up? I think that's the biggest thing for me, finding somebody like that to produce more than just 5 sacks in the entire year will make this Detroit Lions defense especially take that next step that I think they are very much overdue to take. So that's pretty much it for the Lions. That's the only real thing I believe that they need. Then moving on to the next team, the Chicago Bears, the biggest question of all offseason. Everything revolves around Caleb Williams. What do you do to get the best out of him and make sure that his transition is as smooth as possible? You got him the run game. I think that's going to be huge. A lot of the attention will be going to the Keenan Allens, the DJ Moores, the Roma Dunzes, but the running game will be huge as well. And last year, I feel like that was very underwhelming when you had Justin Fields there, and you didn't really get too much out of it. But now with DeAndre Swift back there, he might not be a bell cow sort of running back right off the bat. That he did struggle with injuries a lot prior to last year with the Philadelphia Eagles. Now he's coming off of his best year. They were able to rotate him a good amount in some of their games, and now him coming off of that momentum to join the Bears, I think that's exciting for them to really benefit off of him coming off of that momentum. Then you look elsewhere. This offensive line, it's not awful, like really bad, but there are some spots that they could improve upon other than Tevin Jenkins, Darnell Wright, and Ryan Bates. They have a few spots on this offensive line that I think could improve, but again, I thought they did an all-right job of addressing it a little bit in the offseason. Then elsewhere, not just on the offensive side of the ball, but having that defense continue on their momentum from last year. And after the arrival of Montez Sweat, you almost saw the potential that this defense could get to. And if they continue that on, it'll help Caleb Williams a lot, knowing that you have a reliable option on that defensive side of the ball that'll get you the ball back, that won't give up a lot of points. And that way you don't feel like you need to score 20, 23 points a game. If your defense is great and they're allowing under 18 or 19 points a game, then I think that takes off some of the pressure from Caleb Williams as well. And the biggest thing for me also to just go along with this is how their new offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron, and how his system tries to mold itself around Caleb Williams. So many coaches and coordinators are married to their way of doing things. And I think with Caleb, finding this diamond in the rough, finding the guy now to take your franchise to the next level like many people think Caleb could do, having Shane Waldron be essentially Caleb's best friend, molding the offense to his skill set, calling the plays to benefit Caleb. A big, knock against Caleb last year was taking a lot of sacks and just always being, in a rush and making these miraculous plays. You can't always do that at the NFL level. You hardly can always do that, honestly, at the NFL level. So making sure that Caleb is in a spot where he feels comfortable, he understands everything, understands the system like the back of his hand. I think eliminating some of those sacks will make him a lot calmer, obviously, and a lot more reliable option to not always have to be Superman and do all these things where you have the weapons out there. They're certainly going to get open. It's going to make it a lot easier for Caleb to be successful. So that's where I'm at with them. How do they figure out a strategy to make this whole situation a lot easier for Caleb in his transition? And then the last one of the most obvious ones, the quarterback battle between J.J. McCarthy and Sam Darnold. Darnold is penciled in to start, but both of them have started, splitting some carries with the first team offense. Again, they're going to be, with this week being the start of the preseason, I'm sure both of them are going to be out there at some facet of the game. Maybe not the first game, but there's still 2 more games after that. We're going to see both of those guys out there, and I think that'll be a good sign, not only for Darnold because he is entering a new situation, but also JJ, how quickly he's picked up this offense at this level will certainly be fascinating to watch. And also, continuing on a little bit into the regular season, how long that leash is for Sam Darnold. How much leeway does he have to maybe make a couple mistakes before the Minnesota Vikings decide to pull him, maybe incorporate JJ and start him if Sam Darnold is struggling. I want to see where their breaking point is with all of that, and just making sure JJ overall is ready as possible as he can be when that moment comes. Could it be this season? It is likely. I feel like with rookie quarterbacks, they hardly ever sit a whole year in their first year. I probably would anticipate JJ starting at some point, but to make sure that he is ready, as prepared as possible when that moment comes, will also be something that will have to be on the Minnesota Vikings' mind when that moment comes. But that's pretty much it for the division. Those are the biggest remaining questions for me in the NFC North. Let me know what you guys think about that on those questions and just maybe other things that I didn't touch on in this division. But that'll wrap it up for that segment. We're going to move on to some more contract talks, talking about the Chiefs, like I mentioned before, and having still to figure out the contract extensions for their starting center, their starting right guard, and their starting linebacker, all on contract years in 2024. How could they muster up a plan to do that? Plus, coming up also, we're going to talk about the quarterback battle, the depth chart that came out for the Denver Broncos, and what that says to us on where this quarterback battle is, and also just talking about the Patriots and how they plan to deploy their quarterbacks in their first preseason game tomorrow when the NFL preseason kicks off fully. Those topics are coming up right after this break. Don't go anywhere.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Continuing on here with some more contract discussions, this time in the AFC and talking about the reigning Super Bowl champions in the Kansas City Chiefs. It isn't all, as easy as they make it look, honestly. They do have to go over some of the contract extensions and still have to make sure they retain some of their best remaining players on their team. And some of the biggest players, honestly, aren't the sexiest players to talk about. You don't always talk about it, Brandon Aiyuk, in terms of receiver. Quarterbacks like the Dallas Cowboys have to do with Dak. the Kansas City Chiefs have to focus on more of their offensive line and their starting linebackers, specifically their center, Creed Humphrey, their right guard, Trey Smith, and their linebacker, Nick Bolton, all of them, oddly enough, drafted in 2021. And what's even weirder is that none of them were first-round picks. And talking about the level that each of these guys bring to their specific position, it's pretty insane how they drafted all of these guys. Trey Smith was a 6th-round pick, Creed Humphrey in the 2nd round, and I think Nick Bolton also was in the 2nd or 3rd round. And now, to build this entire Super Bowl winning team, this dynasty that they have with these guys that weren't even first-round picks, you feel like you hit the lottery with each of these guys, all in the same draft class as well. You would, of course, want to retain all of them in the near future, and that's what the Kansas City Chiefs are trying to do with 3 of their most important starters now. None of them obviously have 5th-year options because, again, none of them were first-round picks. So they're going to, after being drafted in 2021, 2024 is the last year on the rookie contracts for all of these guys. So how do they find it within the salary cap? Where do they find the room to extend these guys? And what could these contracts potentially look for or look to in terms of each guy and how the market shapes out for centers, right guards, and linebackers? But ideally, the Kansas City Chiefs will try to keep these guys before week 1. They'll try to negotiate new contracts before the start of the regular season. At least that's what their general manager, Brett Veach, said recently in being asked about how they are in progression with each of their contracts. He said that ideally he'd like to get more than one done during this period of training camp, and they already extended one of their main guys, Harrison Butker, their kicker, making him the highest paid kicker in NFL history. So they already got through with him, a very good player at his position, a very good kicker, a weapon, honestly, for them to keep. That was a no-brainer, but now you still have 3 of the most important positions to get to, and General Manager Brett Veach wants to get these guys done. He said that it is in his best interest to do it, and that he feels that each of them will want to stay with the Chiefs, obviously, long-term. He doesn't feel any, deferring options on the feelings. He feels like the feelings are mutual to try and keep these guys with the team going forward. And now you look at each of them and what each of these guys bring to the Chiefs, and just overall, you look at Creed Humphrey, has quietly, almost established himself as the best center, if not one of the best centers in the National Football League. Obviously, with how important that relationship is with Patrick Mahomes, that center to quarterback relationship, you want to keep that going. Obviously, a lot of people don't think about it too much just because it's the center, right? How much can he really impact the game? But if you ask Patrick Mahomes, I bet he would hold Creed Humphrey right up there with one of the most important pieces to the entire team. So it's going to be vital to keep Creed Humphrey, obviously. Also, Trey Smith, like I said, drafting him in the 6th round, and now him easily exceeding any expectations that anybody had for him as that 6th round pick, to be as good as he is at his position, but also as reliable as he has been. He's only missed 1 game for the Kansas City Chiefs in this entire run that he's been with them, so that's fantastic to have for your offensive lineman to always be there. He's exceeded his value, like I said. To find this diamond in the rough at right guard is great for the Chiefs, so that's another reason to want to keep Trey Smith. And then you look at Nick Bolton, same thing, a leader now on the defensive side of the ball. After the Chiefs ended up losing their past linebacker, Willie Gay, he signed with the New Orleans Saints this offseason. They felt that they were able to survive without Willie Gay, because Willie Gay was a good player for them, but they felt comfortable having him move on because not only did they still have Nick Bolton, but also the breakthrough season that Drew Tranquill had. You saw how they extended him. That partnership now is something that you want to keep going into the near future, into the next couple of years, 3-4 years, however long the extension is. That's ideally what you want to happen, and you don't want to have to be in a position where you could lose Nick Bolton in free agency next year potentially, and just be beaten out by the highest bidder, because I think we've seen just this offseason too how these linebackers get signed pretty quickly. You saw Drew Tranquill get re-signed by the Chiefs, and also Patrick Queen is another one signed by the Pittsburgh Steelers to a pretty lucrative deal. the linebackers, especially at the age where, they're 26 to like 29 years old, they go pretty fast because those are the years where obviously they are reaching the prime, the peak of their career. So they don't stay on the market too long, and the Chiefs don't want to run the risk of losing yet another linebacker, especially with how much Nick Bolton, means to this team on that side of the ball. So what kind of contracts are we kind of looking towards for these guys? Well, starting off with Trey Smith, like I mentioned, probably the most reliable guy, the healthiest guy out of all these positions. He is set to make around $900,000 this year in terms of salary based on the rookie contract that he had. On the per year basis, he's set to make around $900,000, and the top earning right guards make close to $20.5 million per year. So the guard market is a lot bigger and a lot more rich than the center market. Obviously, with Chris Lindstrom making about the max, he's the highest earning guard at $20.5 million. And then you have somebody like Wyatt Teller, who is a very good right guard at his position and a very good player overall. He's making around $14 million as a guard as well. So I think Trey Smith, for how much he's proven to be a reliable asset, how much he's brought to this offensive line where they don't have to worry about the interior of that offensive line pretty much throughout the entire time that he's been there alongside Creed Humphrey. I'm not saying he could reset the market like Chris Lindstrom or something like that, but I think falling anywhere between that range, like I said, of 20.5 or 14 million, I think is what Trey Smith will be vying for, and it seems like something that the Chiefs could, afford up until this point. They don't have too many high-earning guys that are the highest earners at their respective markets. Just off of the top of my head, I don't think they have anybody that they are really having at the top of the market. I can't think of anybody. It's certainly not Patrick. They don't have any receivers earning that much. The running backs, definitely not. I guess Travis Kelce would be the only one. I'd have to check it, though. It'd probably be close in terms of the highest earning tight ends. But if it is Travis Kelce, they only have one guy making the market price at their position. They could certainly afford this, especially if Trey Smith might not fall into the range of trying to be the highest earning right guard at his position. And it's similar and a little bit more beneficial for Creed Humphrey because he is set to make $1.3 million this year, and the highest earner at his position is Frank Ragnow, and he's only making $13.5 million per year as a salary. So the center market is a little bit more team friendly. I feel like Creed Humphrey, like I said before, has established himself as one of the best centers in the NFL, if not the best already. So I think he's made a good case for himself to at least bring it to the table to Brett Veach and talk about being the highest earning center in the NFL, especially with $13.5 million being the limit. I think Creed could definitely exceed that and maybe earn around $14 or $15 million as a center on a 4-year deal is probably my most accurate guess of what he could get. And then just lastly, talking about Nick Bolton, he is similarly set to make around $1.4 million this year. And the linebackers, like I said, are getting paid pretty lucratively because you look at the top earner, Roquan Smith, he's at about $20 million per year. And I think it's him followed up by Tremaine Edmonds for the Chicago Bears. And there might be another name thrown in there as well as some of the highest earners. But then you have guys like Azeez Al-Shaair, Patrick Queen, and Mike Milano earning around $11 to $14 million per year. I think that would probably be the range that I see Nick Bolton falling into. The other guy is Fred Warner. They're all making around $18 to $20 million. Fred Warner, Tremaine Edmonds, and Roquan Smith are all the top 3 highest paid linebackers. I don't think Nick Bolton is in that range personally, but I think if you're getting paid like an Azeez Al-Shaair, Patrick Queen, and Mike Milano, around $14 to maybe $16 million per year in terms of salary for Nick Bolton, I think would be a fair asking price for the Kansas City Chiefs to sign him, just based on the value that he brings to them. A very good linebacker, but I don't think he meets the impact level of a Fred Warner, right? A Tremaine Edmonds or a Roquan Smith. Those guys have certainly created the line in the sand, right, to establish themselves as the three best. And then everybody else below them, I think, kind of falls in line based on how you evaluate linebackers, your preference overall. I think that's where Nick Bolton could, strive to earn. And the Chiefs, I think would be more than willing to give him a contract around that. But, it's not these market-setting crazy prices, other than maybe Creed Humphrey. They don't have these high-earning positions, and that's probably what makes the Chiefs one of the most just reliable and just well-run organizations, because they find these guys at such low value in the draft, prices, that once it is time to pay them, they are solid. But again, none of them really are these extraordinary players at their positions. They just do the best that they can at their set role, and that's how they keep this well-oiled machine going throughout the entire dynasty that they've built out so far. And that's something I think more teams need to do. But the fact that they could keep all these guys, I'm pretty confident that they'll do it. But other than the fact that maybe they get priced out if they take too long with any of these guys, could be my only worry. But it seems like all these guys want to stay. Why would you even want to leave, honestly, the Kansas City Chiefs? But those are the three main guys that they still have to figure out. General Manager Brett Veach is working tirelessly to do it. I'm pretty confident that they'll do it. But who knows? If they take too long, one of these guys will certainly be a high asking price, a high sought-out guy in the free agent market. But that'll be that. That's pretty much all the updates we have on their contract extensions up until now, which means we have to move on to the next topic on the Denver Broncos, talking about their depth chart that came out and some of the questions I have, because it was a little bit contradicting to what has been reported up until this point. And also later on, just to close out the show, talking about the New England Patriots and their quarterback plan starting the preseason this weekend. So we have some more to talk about after this break. Don't go anywhere.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
We are back now on the show to go over some of the new depth charts that have dropped over the last few days. More of these teams are coming out with the depth charts now, starting the preseason in just a few days now, actually tomorrow, with the first couple of games starting off the preseason. But with that being the case, I wanted to talk about the just confusion I had with the Denver Broncos depth chart, just because based on what I've seen and I've read and what Sean Payton and all these, reporters around the Denver Broncos have been saying, to see the depth chart come out in the way that it did had me, with some questions that I wanted to address on today's show. Again, revolving around their three main guys. Right from the start of the offseason, it was said that they were going to have a proper quarterback competition between their draft pick, Bo Nix, Zach Wilson, who they signed in the offseason, and Jarrett Stidham, who was their starter to end the year in 2023. And now the depth chart, brought up some interesting things that I wanted to bring up on today's show. Obviously, with these quarterbacks, right away you saw how it all played out. Starting from the penciled-in starter at the number one spot, you have Jarrett Stidham. Then it was followed up by Zach Wilson as the backup quarterback, and then you had the rookie Bo Nix as the third quarterback in the depth chart. And now, as a preface to all of this, these unofficial depth charts are sometimes released just because they have to be released at this point of the season, but at times they are published by, these teams PR teams or some teams that are just not the coaches, in some instances. So that's the only real caveat in this unofficial depth chart. But sometimes they are, produced by some of these coaches. And I don't know what the case was with the Denver Broncos depth chart, if that was, put together by Sean Payton or some of the coaching staff or just somebody else unrelated to the team. I know Mike Tomlin posted the depth chart for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he said that it was pretty accurate. So it all depends on the system, or not the system, but the team and the context around each of their situations. So I don't know how the Broncos, posted this depth chart, but questions, around Zach Wilson, one, being at number 2. I thought that was the most glaring point of it, because it is a little bit just contradicting to what I've been seeing and I've been reading on these reports around how the quarterback battle has been, played out so far. Zach Wilson has been, I think, the one most on the short end of the stick, just because, according to the Athletics' Nick's Cosmeter, he reported that it has only become a 2-horse race, up until this point, between Bo Nix and Jarrett Stidham. He said that Zach Wilson actually stopped taking as many reps with the first team offense over the last few weeks in comparison to the increase of reps that Bo Nix has had with the first team. Same thing said with Jarrett Stidham. So, these two guys, pretty evidently, it seems to be between Bo Nix and Jarrett Stidham. So for Zach Wilson to be at number 2, it's just a little bit contradicting, from the reports and from everything being said. And also the fact, talking about Bo Nix now, that I feel like I've seen a lot more praise and a lot more just of a spotlight being shined on him from Sean Payton. And now, I don't want, his comments to be taken out of context or anything like that. I'm not saying he made the direct comparison, but recently, Sean Payton was pleasantly surprised about Bo Nix and his ability to just not take sacks, take the smart play, throw it out of bounds or something like that, and show his maturity in that way. But he went on to talk about, it's sort of reminding him of Drew Brees and how Drew Brees was extremely hard to sack because of his ability to just not take those sacks and not settle for just holding on to the ball for too long. And he brought up the comparison, not directly saying that Bo Nix is already Drew Brees, but that is pretty good company to be compared to a little bit, at least by your head coach in Sean Payton, who, say what you want about him recently, has been one of the more successful coaches in the past, at least. And now with the Denver Broncos, he's trying to rebuild this team up, and to see those comparisons, it is encouraging if you're a Broncos fan to get you excited. But the way he's talked about Bo Nix right away, to put him at number 3, again, was a little bit weird at this point in time, at least for me. And then for Jarrett Stidham to be at number 1, that to me seemed to be like the least surprising thing about this entire depth chart, just because he finished as the starter in 2023, like I said. After the whole situation with Russ broke down and how all of that was just a big mess, it makes sense that he would be penciled in as the number 1. He has the most experience, not only with the Broncos, but just in the NFL as well. So really, we're going to see all these guys, I'm sure, in the preseason now starting in a few days, and how each of them plays, I'm sure, will affect their positioning in this depth chart going forward and how more official it becomes. But in terms of this depth chart now, and how and why it played out the way it did, it kind of goes back to my feelings around drafting Bo Nix and, addressing the quarterback position the way that the Broncos did during the NFL draft, because I felt like at the pick that they had, I think they were 12 or 13. I'm pretty sure they were 12. But regardless of that, where they were, I think made a big deal, because to me, this team, not only were they picking too late, and yeah, maybe they could have got Bo Nix, they obviously did, but I felt that there was no way they were in a position to draft a quarterback, regardless of where they were in the draft, if they were number 1, number 3, or number 8, like the Falcons were. I thought there was no way that they should have drafted a quarterback, just because the rest of this team was far and away from being ready to support a rookie quarterback. But the Denver Broncos ended up going with Bo Nix, and now almost going forward now with how this quarterback battle plays out and using a high draft pick on a quarterback rather than using it on another position that you desperately need, maybe like offensive line or another skill position like wide receiver, somebody else alongside maybe Pat Surtain, Terrion Arnold was still there, Quinyon Mitchell was still there. You could have drafted one of those guys to improve your defense. All these other options that you would have had that I would have preferred, you stuck with the quarterback, and now you're almost stuck not only with Bo Nix and trying to make the best out of this situation with him, and eventually him ideally becoming your starter. How much better is this team going to be in 3 to 4 years, where you most likely still have Sean Payton because of that massive contract and the massive $18 million salary that he's earning still for the next 3 or 4 years? You can't just move on from Sean Payton, and it would look very bad if you moved on from Bo Nix in just a short period of time. So these guys, you're pretty much married to them for the next couple of years now, and you have to make the best out of this situation, or else you're going to just stuck being mediocre again for the next 3 or 4 years with Sean Payton because of that contract that you gave him, Bo Nix as well, just because he can't do too much with the weapons and the support system that he has around him. So it just makes me think of that, with this depth chart and how it all has played out. Depending on who the starting quarterback is, if it is Bo, if it is Jared, maybe in some world it could be Zach Wilson. I just felt that you're not going to get that big of a difference in production from a Bo Nix or from any rookie quarterback that you drafted, just because the rest of your team wasn't in a good spot. And if you didn't draft the quarterback and it was down between Zach Wilson and Jarrett Stidham, I think the production would have still been around the same that you were going to get if it was a rookie quarterback and they were, lights out and playing great. The rest of the team, I think, is just not in a good spot right now to much less support a rookie quarterback, but just support any quarterback. That being the case, I felt they could have built around something else and, left the quarterback for maybe another year, because Sean Payton was going to stay here regardless because of that contract. You could have looked towards next year or the following year after that if you didn't like the quarterback class next year. Really built this team up and then look to finally fill in that missing piece at quarterback, almost like the Chicago Bears did, almost like the Commanders did to some extent, and even the Minnesota Vikings as well. I like their situations a lot better than this one, and who knows, Bo Nix now, a more experienced rookie coming in here, maybe that benefits him a little bit more, but I don't see them really overproducing just because they have Bo Nix here and they drafted a quarterback, especially playing in that division, the AFC West. Having the Chiefs there, seeing them twice a year doesn't help too much. So it's probably going to be around the same year that they had last year, in all honesty, regardless of who the quarterback is. But the way it initially played out with this depth chart, I thought was pretty curious in how it was laid out. But overall, let me know what you guys think on the quarterback position, this quarterback battle going on in Denver, and who you would potentially start right away. Do you think it's a good thing to start Bo Nix right away, or give it to Jarrett Stidham and have Bo Nix earn it in a different way? But that'll do it for that segment. We have one more short topic to get to on today's show, talking some more quarterback talk in the New England Patriots, how they plan on using all 4 of their quarterbacks in their first preseason game, and talking about that, seeing Drake May play for the first time. We're going to get into all of that when we return after this quick break. We'll be right back. Thank you for joining me here on the last segment of today's show, talking some more about the preseason, inching closer and closer to seeing some actual football back on our screens. I'm sure a lot of people are looking forward to seeing some more of the new kickoff formats, but also there's a lot of storylines that you could look into in the preseason as well. It's not just about not actual football, seeing some players that maybe you're not too familiar with. You do get to see some exciting things, and it doesn't fall too far off from the quarterbacks that you're potentially going to see. Some of the rookies, some of the guys that are trying to make a roster spot. I think all of that is pretty interesting, at least to me, when talking about the preseason. And one of the first games, the first game that we're going to see is between the Carolina Panthers and the New England Patriots. That one is set to kick off, I think, simultaneously with the Giants and Lions game tomorrow. Those are the only two games on tomorrow, but with the Carolina Panthers and the New England Patriots, talking about that game tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We're talking not only about the two lowest scoring teams from a year ago, but what's exciting about this is the potential to see the number 3 overall pick, Drake May, in his first sort of NFL action. Again, we're still talking about the preseason, but getting to see where Drake May is now, where this entire journey has taken him through voluntary workouts, mini camp, training camp now. You'd hope to have seen some development and at least some sort of a, not polished look, but some improvement at least from Drake May. I think you've seen some flashes, some ups and downs so far through training camp, and that's all right just because he's not going to be the starter, so he doesn't really have too much pressure on him just yet. The plan was always to have Jacoby Brissett be this bridge guy and have him be that bridge guy for as long as Drake May needed to look as prepared as he can be when it is his time to start. But his journey will start with this preseason game, and he will be playing in this game after we kind of had the idea that Caleb could have played in last week's Hall of Fame game. He was ultimately held out of that, and now we'll see Drake May be the first quarterback to be playing in the preseason, to get some action here in the offseason, drafted in this first round. And Gerard Mayo, the new head coach of the New England Patriots, just basically confirmed that in one of his recent interviews that he did, when he said, when he gets in the game, we'll talk about that, but he will play, talking about Drake May. Everyone who is healthy enough to play in the game will play in the game. So he kept it short and sweet, basically having all these, not only Jacoby Brissett and Drake May play, but also we're going to see some Joe Milton. We're going to see Bailey Zappi in this game as well. We're going to see all 4 quarterbacks take some snaps, and how those snaps are distributed. How many snaps does Jacoby Brissett play? Maybe Drake May plays a little bit more than everybody else, or maybe just each quarterback plays a quarter of the NFL game, obviously. So that's my thinking. I'm assuming they're each going to play a quarter, but we're going to see a lot of this team, and I think not only talking about the quarterback play, obviously, but just diverting away from the quarterbacks and talking about this Patriots team overall and how new it is. Obviously, starting a new era with Gerard Mayo. We're going to see a lot of new faces. Maybe the way that they play is a little bit different, not being so old school and vanilla a little bit like they were with Bill Belichick. Maybe Gerard Mayo brings a different flavor to that. Having Van Pelt as their new offensive coordinator could bring some more excitement to them. It is a system that Jacoby Brissett is already familiar with, so that could help them out in the long run overall. But it is exciting just to see this new era of Patriots getting underway. It still looks a little bit weird with not having Bill Belichick out there, but with this quarterback play, obviously that's going to be the main storyline around it. Once Drake May does get into that game and how he runs this offense and who, is playing alongside with him, he has some exciting weapons as well with young wide receivers like Jalen Polk, also Javon Baker. They've been getting rave reviews throughout training camp as well. Seeing those guys and where they are along their journeys to go along with Drake May, I think will be exciting to see in tomorrow's game. We're not, unfortunately, going to see everyone playing. Obviously, the Carolina Panthers have said that Bryce Young is not going to play, so that's another team, obviously, on the other side of things, trying to figure out their offense, their new identity with a new head coach of their own in Dave Canales. We're not going to see Bryce Young. That's unfortunate, but still, even with the Panthers as well, talking about them and starting this new era. They got some new weapons, some new support systems for Bryce Young to be playing in there. We might see some of those guys. Unfortunately, we're not going to see a guy like Jonathan Brooks, the star running back from Texas that they drafted. He's dealing still with that knee injury that he suffered in college. But that's pretty much where things stand right now. Still going back to Drake May, we have seen, like I said before, some encouraging signs from Drake May already in training camp. The reports say that Jacoby Brissett and Drake May have already been splitting time with the first team offense, so that's already pretty encouraging for Drake May and where he is. Coming off of the season that he did at UNC, I think, too, it wasn't as great of the season prior to that he had, and he really put his name on the map. To follow it up by the year that he had in 2023, not awful, but it just was a dip clearly in the year that he had before that. So where he is already seeing some snaps with the first team offense is pretty encouraging. I expect Jacoby Brissett to probably start this game, followed up by Drake May and then Joe Milton and maybe Bailey Zappi as well, potentially in that order. But I think just bringing this up now and, updating you guys on this, I wanted to bring it up because in some of these games we're not going to see some of the rookie quarterbacks or some of these starting quarterbacks play, and I'm not a really big fan of that. They don't have to play the first game, but I think specifically for the rookies, and going back to last weekend, the Chicago Bears, seeing how the Bears decided to hold off on Caleb and not letting him go out there, I felt that, what would have it done for Caleb Williams if he played maybe one or two drives. He didn't have to go and play a whole half or anything like that, but I would have loved to have seen him play already in that Hall of Fame game, and having that Hall of Fame game in there is almost just an additional week to get Caleb prepared, so I didn't really see too much of the harm in, having him out there for a drive or two, but that's beside the point. We're moving on to this week now. We're going to see Caleb this week on Saturday, I believe, to go along with Jaden Daniels, who's also going to be playing in his first preseason action. When the Minnesota Vikings play, I'm sure we're going to see J.J. McCarthy. And talking about some of these other quarterbacks that are just not rookies, I'm sure we're not going to see Aaron Rodgers play in his game alongside the Commanders. They play against each other. He's going to be held off. We're going to see Michael Penix play as well in the Falcons' first preseason game. Kirk Cousins is unlikely to play, but at least we get to see Michael Penix. That's another one that, draws a lot of eyes with the surprise pick that he was for the Falcons. Where's he at in his development? That'll be something certainly to tune into. And talking again of those guys that I mentioned not being rookies, Jordan Love is going to get some preseason action in the first game as well. And it is a little surprising just because usually teams hold off on them at least until the second week maybe, and then the third week they go back to other guys that they like to get some last looks in before they make the roster cuts. But I was pretty surprised to see Jordan Love will be playing in the preseason. Talking about the Houston Texans and how they also played last week in the Hall of Fame game. They are set to play their starters this week, so we're going to get our first looks at C.J. Stroud, Stephon Diggs out there, Tank Dell, and how he's recovering from his injury. They're playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, and along those lines, we're also going to see Justin Fields play. Russell Wilson has been ruled out. Mike Tomlin said today that he will not be playing, but seeing this Steelers team now, a lot of newness that they brought in with some weapons, new receiving core. The offensive line is also new. You're going to see Justin Fields now in a new team. How is he looking with a new system, obviously, with Arthur Smith coming in as well? I think this week is going to have a lot of things to talk about, which is great for me, but also we're going to see a lot of, the progression of these quarterbacks, not just rookie ones, but some new names in new places as well. It should make for an exciting preseason. That's what the preseason pretty much is overall. Seeing where these guys are in their development, seeing especially this year some of the new rules and formats and things that the NFL is trying to incorporate, all makes it a better spectacle than just realizing it is essentially just practice. But regardless of that point, I'm certainly going to be tuning into these games. I'm excited to see Drake May play whenever he gets to play, how many snaps he gets. It should be pretty telling. It is only the first week of preseason, but still, it should be something to watch if you guys have nothing else going on this weekend. But that is pretty much all I wanted to get to on today's show. That'll wrap it up for today's episode. I want to thank you guys for joining me on today's show. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. If you want to see more of this show, specifically going forward, check out both YouTube channels, the Podcast Network channel and the GSMC Sports Network channel. For all the live shows are on there, recorded, the individual segment videos as well, and YouTube shorts on top of that. And as a final reminder, tune in every weekday to catch these live episodes each weekday, like I said, at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, to talk some more NFL, some of the latest storylines in this league with me, Manny Maradiegue, as your host. Thanking you again for joining me, and I hope to see you guys back here with me again tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.